Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me.
The rising sun barely kissed the horizon when King Varian set foot on the Pandaren Isles, a place where whispers of neutrality hung in the air like the scent of incense. The soft padding of his boots against the cobbled path was the only sound, save for the distant hum of morning prayer from the nearby temple. Beside him walked Lady Kalia, her eyes as sharp as ever, watching everything but saying nothing. Behind them, a small retinue of loyal guards flanked the king, their presence a formality more than necessity in this peaceful land. Varian's mind was far from peaceful, though. He was not here for diplomacy as the pretense suggested, but because the alliance was breaking apart. In Stormwind, his capital, whispers of insurrection echoed through the halls. General Tobias Fordring, a man with ambition running hotter than his blood, had gathered a faction against Varian. The cause? Varian's insistence on diplomacy over brute force, a stance that Fordring found weak and unbecoming of a king. Varian knew that if the alliance fell into civil war, the consequences would be devastating. He needed a way to quell the rising tides of dissent, and he needed it without further bloodshed. The Pandaren, known for their wisdom and revered for their neutrality, were his last hope. As they approached the gates of the main Pandaren settlement, Varian's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the gate creaking open. Out stepped Master Lizen, the Pandaren elder, dressed in simple yet elegant robes that swayed gently in the breeze. His fur was silver around the edges, a testament to his age and wisdom, and his eyes gleamed with a depth that could not be read. "Welcome, King Varian," Lizen said in a voice that carried both warmth and caution. "It is not often that a ruler from beyond our shores comes to visit without an army at his back." Varian smiled tightly, dipping his head in respect. "I come with words, not weapons, Master Li." Lizen's gaze flicked briefly toward Lady Kalia, who stood silently beside Varian. Her face remained impassive, but the tension between them did not go unnoticed by the Pandaren elder. With a wave of his paw, Lizen gestured for them to follow. "Come, let us discuss these words in a more peaceful setting." The Pandaren settlement was as serene as the stories had told. Bamboo forests surrounded the village, and the sound of trickling water from the many streams added to the atmosphere of calm. Pandaren monks moved gracefully through the streets, their faces serene, as though the troubles of the world were as distant as the clouds. As Varian followed Lizen through the village, he couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. How simple it must be to live in such a place, untouched by war and strife. But he knew that was an illusion. No one was untouched. Not truly. They were led to a modest temple, where the scent of burning incense greeted them. Inside, the light was soft, and the walls were adorned with tapestries depicting Pandaren historia, tales of great battles and long-standing peace. Varian took his seat across from Lizen, while Lady Kali stood a few paces behind, her presence more of a shadow than a companion. "Tell me, King Varian," Lizen began, his voice slow and deliberate, "what brings you to seek the counsel of the Pandaren?" Varian took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been dreading. The moment where he would have to admit to the frailty of his kingdom. "The alliance is fracturing," he said plainly, his voice low. "There are forces within my own ranks that believe violence is the answer to our internal problems. General Tobias Fordring leads a faction that seeks to overthrow my leadership if I do not take a more aggressive stance. If I push back with force, it will only lead to war. But if I do nothing, I risk losing everything." Lizen listened carefully, his expression never changing. When Varian finished, the elder nodded slowly. "And you believe the wisdom of the Pandaren can prevent this war?" "I believe you can help me find another way," Varian said, his voice almost pleading. "Your people have always been masters of balance, of finding peace without the need for violence. That is what I need now. That is what my kingdom needs." For a long moment, there was silence. Lizen's eyes closed, and he seemed to meditate on Varian's words, his breathing slow and measured. When he finally spoke, His voice was soft but firm. The Pandaren do not involve themselves in the wars of others. It is our way. But that does not mean we are indifferent to the suffering of the world. Varian's heart sank at the elder's words, though he tried not to show it. He had come all this way, and it seemed even the Pandaren would not help him. However, Lisan continued, there are other ways to influence the outcome of a conflict without taking up arms. The Pandaren can offer their wisdom, but it must be done quietly. If we are to help you, it must be in secret. The moment it is known that the Pandaren are involved, your enemies will use it as a weapon against you. Secret? Varian leaned forward. How? Lisan opened his eyes and smiled faintly. Through diplomacy, through words. We will send mediators of Pandaren monks skilled in the art of Pythia to your court. They will act as your advisors, but in truth, they will be working behind the scenes to mediate between you and your enemies. In this way, the Pandaren will help you without ever drawing a sword. Varian felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't the solution he had envisioned, but it was something. And you believe this will work? That depends on you, King Varian, Lisan said. It depends on how much faith you place in peace. As Varian mulled over the elder's words, Shenzayu, a young Pandaren diplomat who had been observing the conversation from the shadows, stepped forward. I believe the alliance can be saved, Your Majesty, Shenzayu said, his voice filled with conviction. But it will require more than just words. It will require trust. Trust in the Pandaren way, and trust in the people of your kingdom. Varian met Shenzayu's gaze and nodded slowly. He didn't fully trust anyone at this point, but he had little choice. Lady Kalia, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward and bowed slightly. Master Li, I believe King Varian will do what is necessary to preserve peace, she said, her voice soft but with an edge. But there are those within the alliance who will see any form of mediation as weakness. We must be cautious. Lisan turned his gaze to her, studying her closely. And what do you propose, Lady Mittil? She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We use their suspicions against them. If the Pandaren mediators are discovered, we make it seem as though they are working for Fordring's faction. That will divide his supporters and weaken his position, making it easier for King Varian to assert control. Varian stiffened. He didn't like the idea of using deception, but he also knew that in politics, truth was often a matter of perspective. Before he could object, Shenzayu spoke again. That is not the Pandaren way, the young diplomat said firmly. We deal in truth, not lies. If we are to help the alliance, it must be through honest means, not deception. Lisan nodded approvingly at Shenzayu's words. Indeed, if we are to mediate, we must do so with integrity. Lies, no matter how small, will only lead to more conflict. Lady Kalia's smile faded, but she said nothing. Varian glanced at her, knowing full well that she had her own agenda, but for now, he needed her loyalty. I understand, Varian said. We will do this the Pandaren way. Lisan stood and bowed slightly. Then it is settled. We will send our mediators to your court. But remember, King Varian, peace is a fragile thing. It requires constant care, and even the smallest misstep can shatter it. With that, the meeting was concluded, and Varian and his retinue were escorted back to their ship. As they sailed away from the Pandaren Isles, Varian stared out at the horizon, his mind filled with uncertainty. He had come seeking peace, but in doing so, he had set into motion forces that he could not fully control. Back in Stormwind, General Tobias Fordring stood in the war room, his eyes narrowing as he studied a map of the kingdom. He could feel the tides of power shifting, and he knew that Varian was up to something. But what? In the heart of the Pandaren settlement, a small, tranquil garden awaited them, encircled by lush greenery and shaded by the broad leaves of ancient trees. The air was filled with the faint aroma of blooming flowers and the occasional chime of wind chimes, their delicate notes adding a touch of serenity to the scene. A low table made of polished wood was set in the center, Surrounded by comfortable cushions, Li Xin gestured for Varian and Kalia to take a seat while he settled himself across from them. "Please, sit," Li Xin invited. "It seems you have much to share." Varian took a seat, his posture relaxed but his expression serious. Kalia remained standing for a moment longer, her eyes scanning the surroundings with a practiced vigilance before she too sat down. Varian wasted no time. "Master Li, I come to you with a request. The alliance is in turmoil. General Tobias Fordring has rallied a faction against my leadership. His followers believe in using force to resolve our internal strife, rather than seeking a peaceful resolution. This division threatens to tear our alliance apart." Li Xin nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I have heard whispers of unrest in the alliance. It is unusual for such a well-established power to be on the brink of collapse. What is it you hope from us?" "I need your counsel and your wisdom," Varian replied. "The Pandaren have always been known for their ability to navigate through conflicts without resorting to violence. I believe your insight could help us restore order within the alliance, without drawing you into the conflict directly." A silence fell over the table as Li Xin considered Varian's words. "We value our neutrality greatly. It is the cornerstone of our existence and our way of life. To involve ourselves, even indirectly, in the affairs of others could compromise that." Kalia, who had been observing quietly, leaned forward. "Master Li, perhaps there is a way to help without compromising your principles. Varian's situation is dire. If the alliance fractures, it could have repercussions far beyond their borders. The stability of the entire realm is at risk." Li Xin's eyes met hers, and he saw the sincerity in her expression. "You make a compelling argument, Lady Kalia, but neutrality is not something we take lightly. If we assist you, it must be in a manner that does not breach our own values." Varian nodded. "I understand, and I would not ask you to do so. Perhaps there is a middle ground we can find. I seek your guidance on how to approach this matter delicately, without direct involvement." Li Xin pondered this for a moment, his gaze shifting to the serene garden around them. "Very well, I will offer you the wisdom of our elders. We will discuss the matter among ourselves and consider how best we might assist without stepping beyond our bounds." The discussion turned to the practicalities of how the Pandaren might lend their support indirectly. Li Xin proposed that they could provide Varian with strategies and insights into conflict resolution that had been honed over centuries. This would allow Varian to address the unrest within the alliance using the knowledge and tools offered by the Pandaren, without the Pandaren themselves having to intervene directly. As the meeting drew to a close, Varian expressed his gratitude. "Thank you, Master Li. Your willingness to help, even in this indirect manner, means more than you know." Li Xin inclined his head slightly. "We shall do what we can." The path to peace is often fraught with obstacles, but it is one worth pursuing. The sun was setting when Varian and Kalia prepared to leave the Pandaren Isles. They had been given a set of scrolls containing strategies and philosophies on conflict resolution, a precious gift that Varian hoped would help him navigate the treacherous waters of his internal conflict. As they boarded their transport, Varian glanced back at the peaceful isle, a mixture of hope and apprehension in his heart. The journey back to Stormwind was somber, the weight of his task pressing heavily on his shoulders. Lady Kalia remained quiet, her mind clearly working through the implications of their visit. It was only when they reached the bustling city of Stormwind that Varian felt the gravity of their return. The city was alive with a murmur of discontent, and he knew that the real challenge was only beginning. The days that followed were filled with intense discussions and careful maneuvering. Varian studied the scrolls with great diligence, implementing the Pandaren strategies in his attempts to quell the unrest within the alliance. He called upon his loyal advisors and sought counsel from those who had once been his rivals, hoping to bridge the gap between the conflicting factions. The tension between Varian and General Fordring continued to escalate. Fordring's faction was not easily swayed, their belief in the necessity of force deeply ingrained. Varian, armed with the wisdom of the Pandaren, attempted to negotiate and mediate, but each meeting seemed to end in frustration. Lady Kalia, meanwhile, was working behind the scenes, her own agenda gradually unfolding. She had been subtle, yet relentless in her attempts to manipulate the situation to her advantage. Her goal was to use the chaos to consolidate her own power, but her machinations were careful to avoid direct confrontation with Varian. In the midst of this, Varian found an unexpected ally in one of Fordering's closest advisors. The advisor, though sympathetic to Fordering's cause, had grown disillusioned with the general's aggressive tactics. He saw in Varian's approach a glimmer of hope for a more sustainable peace. Through clandestine meetings, Varian and the advisor worked together to weaken Fordering's grip on his faction, aiming to bring about a compromise. The turning point came during a grand assembly called by Varian. He addressed the gathered leaders of the alliance, presenting the Pandaren strategies and philosophies as a beacon of hope. His speech was passionate, underscoring the necessity of unity and the promise of a future built on cooperation rather than conflict. The assembly was tense, and for a moment, it seemed that the divisions might only deepen. But then, something shifted. A few voices began to echo Varian's call for unity, and the atmosphere in the hall began to change. It was not a complete victory, but a significant step towards healing the rift. In the weeks that followed, Varian continued to work tirelessly, implementing the Pandaren strategies and seeking to mend the fractured alliance. The path to peace was still fraught with challenges, but with each small victory, he felt a renewed sense of hope. The Pandaren, for their part, continued to remain aloof from the direct conflict, their wisdom serving as a guiding light from the sidelines. Master Li Zhen and his people watched with quiet satisfaction as their counsel began to bear fruit, helping Varian navigate the treacherous waters of his political landscape. As the story of Varian's struggle and the Pandaren's indirect assistance unfolded, it became clear that the road to peace was long and difficult, but not impossible. The alliance was slowly moving towards a more stable future, and the influence of the Pandaren's wisdom had played a crucial role in guiding them through the storm. The final pages of the scrolls were filled with hope, a testament to the enduring power of diplomacy and the strength found in unity. The alliance was not yet fully healed, but with the Pandaren's guidance and Varian's unwavering resolve, the future seemed a little brighter. And as the sun set over Stormwind, casting its golden light over the city, there was a sense of cautious optimism. The journey was far from over, but the path ahead was now illuminated by the wisdom of the Pandaren and the determination of a king who refused to surrender to the chaos of war.